opening a criminal investigation into former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. This is according to Fox News. They say that the DOJ is looking into whether Cuomo lied to Congress about the decisions that he made as governor during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that means the Trump administration is now in an unusual spot where they're ending a criminal case against current New York City Mayor Eric Adams while opening a new inquiry into Adams' main rival. Live look at New York City. Former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani is joining us to discuss all of this. Neama, here's why they're looking into Cuomo. And this is a little bit complex. I'm going to read it and we'll try and make this make sense. They're looking into Cuomo because he was grilled by Republican lawmakers last year about his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then those lawmakers later accused him of intentionally lying to Congress about the excessive number of nursing home deaths in his state while he was governor. What kind of charge could come from something like that?
Austin, they're really looking at two potential charges. I don't think he was testifying under penalty of perjury to the subcommittee. If so, perjury charges may be filed. But we're looking at making false statements, and those can be made to any federal officer. It doesn't have to be under penalty of perjury. This is what we call 1001. And we've seen charges like this with respect to Flynn and others who have either talked to the FBI or made statements before Congress. So that's one. The second could be obstruction of justice. It's a little bit more challenging. That's more serious than making false statements, does carry a potential 20-year sentence. But if they're trying to impede Congress's ability to either investigate or oversee states and their response to the coronavirus, then you may be looking at obstruction charges as well.
So let's see here. Andrew Cuomo is running against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. They are going to face off in November's mayoral race. A federal judge just permanently dismissed a case against Adams in April, and now there's this new inquiry into Cuomo, Neama. The optics are a bit tricky, aren't they?
No question. This is what everyone's talking about, right? When the Department of Justice dismissed the indictment against Mayor Eric Adams, they cited two reasons. One is cooperation with the Trump administration when it comes to immigration enforcement. But two, election interference. They said that charging Adams when he was running for election was improper. It was the Department of Justice engaging in lawfare. Well, now we're much closer to that New York mayoral election. We're about a month away from the primary. So this is something that the Department of Justice does not typically do. They don't announce investigations right before an election. And they certainly don't charge people right before the election. I know we're not there yet. The other issue is the acting U.S. Attorney, Jeanine Pirro, is a rival of Cuomo's. They ran against each other for attorney general. They have a history. And look, I like Jeanine. I've been on her show. She's interviewed me. But again, the optics just look bad here when you're handling one candidate a certain way and you're handling the other candidate, the other major candidate, really the front runner, I think, Austin, completely differently. Very bad look for the DOJ here.
Yeah, would the DOJ be looking into this if Cuomo wasn't running for office, if he wasn't in the public spotlight right now? Is that a fair question to ask right now?
That's a very fair question. You know, again, we're talking about a pretty material misstatement, in my opinion. Cuomo reportedly reported about 6,000 or so deaths when the number was well over 9,000. And apparently, allegedly, there's some evidence that he was involved and this wasn't just an innocent or negligent mistake. It was intentional. Again, I'm not saying there's any merit to it, but at least that's what the allegations are. But yeah, if it was an ordinary Joe Schmo testifying before a House subcommittee and they weren't a former New York governor running for mayor of the biggest city in the United States, we'll be having this conversation. Probably not. And, you know, some people think that, you know, politicians, they get a free pass, but oftentimes they're targets. And I can say this about both sides of the aisle. Donald Trump was probably targeted because of who he was. Hunter Biden, people said, you know, he was being selectively prosecuted. And now Cuomo, I think a lot of the charges that many of these candidates and elected officials face, they would not necessarily be facing if it was just an ordinary citizen.
So let's talk about the timeline. Let's say the DOJ moves forward with this. What would the timeline look like, considering November's election? How much of a distraction could this bring to a campaign between now and November?
Austin, it'd be a huge distraction. It'd be a potential game changer. You're talking about someone who's under indictment while they're running for office. I think that will turn off a significant percentage of voters that don't want their mayor to be a convicted criminal. Now, it wouldn't be a bar to him holding office. We know all about the restrictions on a New York mayor because of the Eric Adams case. You know, potentially the governor could step in and remove the mayor. There's some provisions under New York state law, but Cuomo could be under indictment. He could even be a convicted felon and be mayor of New York City. There's nothing under the law that prohibits him from doing so.
How soon could we see anything from the DOJ at this point? Is it just a waiting game?
It really is. It could be weeks, it could be months, and they don't necessarily have to announce that they're closing the investigation. Really, it's going to depend on the people who were there when this report was prepared and those changes were made. Apparently, there's some handwritten notes by Cuomo himself that made these changes, reduce the number by thousands. Again, just allegations. If so, those individuals and that writing, those communications by Cuomo himself, I think that may be the real determining factor whether he's charged or not.
Former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani, as always, good to see you. Take care.
Great seeing you, Austin. Talk soon.
All right, let's hit our final break of the hour. We are looking at, the White House on this Wednesday evening.